Paranormal M takes you on a journey through the supernatural and the unexplained. Subscribe now and stay connected to our spine-tingling stories. The darkness is calling. Are you ready? Weird things happening in my new house. I live in a pretty old house. It's been turned into a rental property. Ever since I moved in, things have been weird. It first began with noises. I wrote it off as old house noises. I've had company over and they always feel very anxious when hearing the noises. Ask me how I feel safe when I'm alone. I just tell them I'm used to it. Then I moved my cat in for my parents. Yeah, I know that cats tend to have a weird personality, but mine began acting different. She first started staring off into the corners of the room looking alarmed. I assumed it was weird cat behavior until she started waking me up over it. I tried to take a nap with her on the couch and wake up to her meowing and staring behind me with a wild look. I want to preface this by saying I've had sleep paralysis and I know what it's like. I was fully awake during both of these incidents. I could move my body. The first one, my cat woke me up when I was trying to sleep for work next morning. When I opened my eyes, I saw writing all over my walls. I kept blinking, but I couldn't make out what any of it was said. Eventually it went away. I slept on the couch. This happened last night. I was awake because sometimes I have insomnia. But anyways, I was lying with my eyes closed trying to fall asleep when I felt pressure on my bed by my foot. I immediately thought it was my cat hopping onto the bed to sleep like she does. I looked down and there was nothing there. I still felt it. I slid my leg under the spot of pressure and I could slide my leg around with ease, like a hand was simply resting on the bed rather than pushing down. I slid my leg underneath and shook it. The pressure let off like somebody lifted their hand. I want to add that I live with my significant other and they claim that they haven't had any strange experiences. I believe it's because he's not paying attention. He's usually playing video games and talking to his friends all day. Creepiest night of my life. I'm a female living in Arizona, a place known for paranormal encounters, extraterrestrial experiences, and all manner of weird hoodoo shit. Now, admittedly, I love the paranormal. I've had a few minor experiences up to this point in my life, but what I experienced just an hour ago takes the cake. If you've ever been to the Southwest, you know one thing about the nights. They're dark, pitch black. Anyway, it's about 11:30 at night and I've dropped off my friend at his house that's in the middle of nowhere after a day of hanging out, playing games, watching one of my favorite horror flicks. I guess I was a touch on edge, and the fact that it had rained all day and the sky was still shrouded by dark clouds that were blocking any and all natural moonlight from helping me see may not have made it any better. The lights on my truck are admittedly not the strongest, and with so little light and a slippery road, you've got to be aware of everything to be safe. So I'm driving down a fairly well-lit but deserted stretch of road a few miles long to start heading back to civilization. All of a sudden, this chill, not really a chill, but a sensation of nope just licks at the back of my neck. I'm coming up on this odd blue light that's hitting the street in front of me, which is already slightly jarring. It's giving the sickly yellow color of the streetlights around it. The second I pass under the blue light, it goes out. I see a huge shadow pass over the road silently in front of me. At this point, I'm getting nervous because this is a bit too much for my already freaked out self. It doesn't get better from there either. I finally reach the highway and I have the option to turn onto a back road that's under a ton of construction, or go down to the highway and get home from there. Naturally, abandoned back road with heavy construction loses. turn onto the highway. About this time, a smaller truck starts really flooring it, like climbing up my bumper as I'm headed toward home. People drive like this in Arizona, constantly want to go 30 above the speed limit. And if not that, then getting so far up your ass you'd think that you were a thong. So it wasn't particularly abnormal at first. Basically, I'm driving down the highway and see my turnoff coming up. So I signal, and the second I do, so does this dude behind me in the truck. No big deal, next turnoff comes up. This one's a left, and you wouldn't believe it, this truck guy does the same a second or two after I signal. Again, not too freaky, making it almost believable. But then, I merge into the far right lane once I make that turn, and so does truck guy. At this point it's getting weird, but I haven't given up hope yet. So I continue past the main entrance of the strip mall that's near my house, and the second I signal to turn again, then merge into the far right lane once more, truck guy does the same, staying very close on my tail and always signaling just a moment after me. At this point, all of my memories of hearing people saying that they were followed kicks in, and I'm trying to think about how I can ensure I don't lead this creep right to my front door. So it hits me. Make 3 consecutive turns in the same direction, and if they're following you, you'll know because 3 turns lead you in a circle. So I think, sure, there's a back entrance to the mall, so I'll pretend to turn in there. I turn toward the mall, stopping at the right turn lane, and truck guy whizzes past me. Take a breath, go back up to the road. Toward my house, I'm determined to get this guy's plates, just in case. And I did too. I repeated the numbers over and over in my head and out loud in the silence of the cab of my truck. This time, luckily, I was the one following. Made me feel safer, more in control. I watched truck guy turn onto a street, and once I see he's gone, I drove past and double-checked in my rear view that the guy isn't back behind me again. Luckily, I don't see him. But right about now, I'm starting to getting the creeps. Only a mile or 2 from my house now, and everything's starting to come to a sort of calm. I make it home looking around before I hop out of my truck and hold my keys close, my finger on the panic button. For those of you who don't know, a panic button on a car's fob can be crazy handy. Keep those keys in your hand when walking alone in a dark street or in a dark place. If somebody gets close to you, hold that button down and the alarm will blare and every set of eyes in the area will be on you in a matter of minutes. And you can bet that whoever's trying to get close won't stick around with all the witnesses peeking out to see what the racket is. Finally, I get inside. I realize just as I'm getting to my bedroom I forgot to take the trash can to the curb. So it's midnight now, and here I am dragging a set of cans down my driveway in the pitch dark. Something again doesn't feel right. It's so quiet, no crickets, no birds, not even bats are flying around. Then as I'm glancing around suspiciously, trying to see anything in the darkness, I spot it. Near the open desert at the end of my street, a tall, pale man is standing just outside the glow of a neighbor's garage lights. Just standing there staring. No discernible facial features, just an extremely tall, pale, and lanky form. At this point, I've seen enough, and I sprint back into the house as my dog starts barking like crazy. I watched the garage door close, then ran right to my room. Been hearing scratches on my bedroom window, and I'm too scared to open the blinds and peek out. What if whatever is scratching started doing what I was doing? Got a blade right next to my bed. Not taking chances. Gotta say, you come across a little bit... Well, I'll just hold my comment. What do you guys think? I had something in my room, and a psychic coworker confirmed it. A couple of years ago, I was working at a job with somebody who told me, pretty much from the point that I met her, that she was psychic. Now I'm a believer in the paranormal and psychics and energy and all that jazz. It wasn't a stretch for me to believe that she might be telling the truth, but I can assure you now that I very much do believe that she is the real deal. When the activity started, It was just one very small thing. I had a little Arctic fox plushie I kept on my bed, and at one point I would come home to it being in the dead center of my bed. It was only ever this one plushie, always in the middle of my bed. I have a dog, and even though she had never moved any of my plushies around before, I kind of shrugged it off and decided it was probably her moving it during the day while I was at work. For days in a row, I would come home to this little fox just sitting there. I'd move it back to its proper spot each day, only to find it in the middle of the bed yet again when I would come home from work the next evening. It was weird, but again, I just shrugged it off as my dog doing these things. The next thing was a bit weirder. I would have vivid dreams, or at least I think they were dreams. I'd be laying in my bed in the dark, and suddenly I'd feel spiders crawling on my exposed skin. Anything over my blanket would have the sensation of spiders running across it. I would jump out of bed fully awake at that point and turn on my light to investigate. Never found a single spider or bug anywhere. The third thing I experienced was the very last thing I could try to explain away. I was laying in bed one night, kind of drifting off as I listened to a horror narrator on YouTube, something I had to credit to what I saw. Don't blame me. I'm laying on my back, facing the ceiling, the top of my headboard, which is incredibly high as I have one of those combo bed dresser headboard things. It's hard to explain, but basically my headboard's a tall dresser with cabinets and drawers surrounding my actual mattress. The part above my bed is the alcove with mirrors and 2 built-in lights that sit inside it, with the top of the headboard dresser being what the lights were fixed into. Anyway, I had a light on the headboard turned on, so as I was blinking in and out of sleep while listening to these stories, I opened my eyes only to see a small black shadow quickly duck behind the ridge at the top of my headboard. I blinked a few times, but I didn't see the shadow again. However, I passed it off by telling myself it was probably my imagination from being so tired. I turned off my light and went to sleep. The fourth and final experience leading up to the end of the story, that's the one that made me stop denying something was definitely happening. One night, I'm doing my routine of listening to scary stories and relaxing in bed. I went to plug in my cell phone. The place where I plug my phone in is right next to where I used to keep my chunky rubber bracelets. You know, the ones you get from Hot Topic. So I go to plug my phone in, and as I turn over to put the charger in the outlet, I see not a foot from my face one of the rubber bracelets move at least an inch to the right directly in front of me. It didn't roll, it slid across a wooden surface. I sat up straight surprised, and I knew what I saw. There's no explaining that away. I just kind of sat there for a few minutes in a what the hell kind of shock. Eventually plugged my phone in and went to bed. At this point in the story, I need to tell you that I not once mentioned these experiences to pretty much anyone. Not my family, not my boyfriend, not my coworkers. Nobody. This is important because the next day after I saw that bracelet move, I went into work. As I sat down at the break room table, only one other person was in the room at the time. And you guessed it, it was my psychic coworker. The moment my butt hit the chair, she casually asked me, "So what's going on in your room?" Stunned, I took a moment to compose myself. Then I explained that I thought there was something, but I really wasn't sure. She nodded and said, "Oh yeah, you have a trickster in your room. It probably got in through your mirrors." I was shocked because, to my knowledge, she had never seen my bedroom. She never even saw pictures, at least that I can remember. There is a chance, looking back, I showed her a picture of my Halloween setup in my room before this, but I honestly can't remember. Either way, her words shocked me. I asked her what she thought I should do about it. She told me to sage my room, especially the mirrors, then tell it to leave. Well, I went home that night and I did just that. I grow sage in my backyard, so I make bundles to smudge my house on occasion. Went around my room, smudging my closet, my whole room, and my mirrors. ending at the window I had opened at the far side of my bedroom. As soon as I got to the window to finish my smudging, the whole frickin' thing just burst into flame. I had to immediately put the smudge stick out, because it just frickin' ignited the second I got to the window. Immediately, I texted my coworker and told her what happened. She explained that the sage bursting into flames was the entity leaving. A final trick, as it would go away. Closed the window, put the sage away, and that was the end of that. I never had anything like that occur in the weeks prior happen again, but I have to say that after the whole thing was said and done, I got curious and looked up tricksters. And what came up kinda cemented that this was in fact very real for me. One of the ones listed was a spider trickster, and the other was a fox. Not sure which one it was, but considering it kept moving my fox plushie, figure maybe that's why. The entity liked messing with phones. Okay, now that that's out of the way, last year, between 5 and 7 months ago, I had a few experiences with something that seemed to have a penchant for messing with phones. A little side info to start the story off. I have a phone that requires a password in order to be shut off completely. It doesn't have, or anyone else's fingerprint, or password either. Oh, doesn't have anyone else's fingerprint as password. So the first thing that happened to start this off is that I woke up one day to my cell phone being unplugged from both my actual phone and the wall outlet itself, as well as being moved from the shelf I put it on when I went to sleep that night to a different nearby shelf. Didn't exactly scream paranormal, but it was weird, and so I didn't really think much of it. Figured I just moved it at some point during the night and didn't remember, even though I've never done anything like that before. The second thing that happened brings up the preliminary information I gave about how my phone shuts off, and it's a process. But you really can only shut the phone off after you've unlocked it, which is why this struck me as much odder than the first occurrence. If you've read my previous post on the sub, you might have figured out that it's kind of a nightly routine to plug my phone in, turn on scary story narrations on YouTube, and leave it playing for on a long video to help me fall asleep. I do this daily. This isn't something that's happened before or since. Essentially, I went to bed following my normal nightly routine. I woke up to my phone being completely shut off. I woke up, reached over to check the time on my phone, and noticed it was turned to completely off. It was weird, but I figured for some reason my phone wasn't charging during the night and died. So I tried to turn it on, expecting to get a no battery sign or whatever. That was only to find it at 100% battery once it booted up. It was weird, and I ended up joking to my family that a ghost turned my phone off. I didn't actually mean it, but I still decided better safe than sorry, due to my previous trickster experience discussed in the last post to sub. I went to bed that night, and as I was sitting in my room, I spoke out of the room and said something along the lines of, "Hey, if there's anything in here, please don't mess with me or my dog, and please don't mess with my phone. I needed to wake up for work, so it's very important you don't mess with any of my electronics, okay? You can stick around as long as you don't do anything to mess with me, my dog, or my stuff." I left it at that. After that, my phone didn't turn off, wasn't unplugged, and didn't move again. Kinda just shrugged it off after that. Until one night I woke from a dead sleep in the middle of the night, rolled over, opened my eyes just for a moment, and saw something. So here's the weird part. This thing I saw was cute. Like it wasn't a person. Can't even really describe it, but it just felt cute. I'm not sure what I believe it was, but it was little, like a child little. Got this weird vibe that it was just this cute little thing. Didn't feel scary or malicious at all. I remember distinctly that as soon as I blinked, it vanished. I literally spoke out loud and said very clearly, "If that was you, You're so cute." Then I fell back to sleep. A week or so later, my grandfather ended up having his work phone go missing around 20 minutes before he had to leave for work. He was searching everywhere around the house for it. I checked the couch, under the cushion, under the actual couch, and I checked the closets. I helped him check underneath his bed, in his closet, everywhere. Eventually, while he, myself, and my grandma were searching for his phone, I came up with the idea to go into my room and talk to the thing that had messed with my phone the weeks before. I told the thing that if it took his phone, it needed to be returned right now, and it was very important that he had it. This entity couldn't mess with anyone's electronics in the house. Then I checked the couch again. Suddenly, the phone was there, sitting under the middle of the couch in pretty plain sight. It wasn't there before, and I'm sure of it because I checked that exact spot before I talked to the thing I thought was hanging out in my room. A few days later, I decided to sage. Not to get rid of what was messing with the phones, just as a routine I do every 6 to 8 weeks to keep stuff that way. I figured it wouldn't chase away the entity that I saw because, well, I didn't feel bad and I only asked negative entities to leave. But I guess the entity decided it had overstayed its welcome. I haven't seen it again, and none of our electronics or other belongings have been moved or played with since. Sounds like a Furby. I saw something at the side of my bed, and it really freaked me out. So, the title is pretty much the biggest part of what I personally experienced with this. The rest comes from my housemate's perspective. Also, I know if I don't mention this up front, somebody's going to drop a comment about how, "This isn't real, she writes scary stories." And yeah, I do write horror stories. Some of them are based off the real paranormal experiences I have. But I'd never post anything fictional to this sub. That's what no sleep is for. Anyway, back to the experience. So this happened just last week. Some events leading up to it came from my housemate's account of what they saw, heard, and felt. It started with housemate T. They were the first to report something. Out of all the people in the house, I'm the only one who really believes or gives much merit to the supernatural. But recently, something happened that spooked my other two housemates pretty badly. One night while T was in bed, I don't know what times he didn't mention, he swore he saw the lamp in his dresser move. He even went as far as to tell my other roommate, my roommate Kay, about this. So Kay brushes it off, says it's probably nothing. Maybe he just imagined it in the dark. And admittedly, it's not much. But I feel like it was the first step in what would come. A few nights later, I'm asleep with my dog, and suddenly I wake up. My dog isn't reacting, and I honestly wasn't sure if she was awake at that moment. But I opened my eyes and glanced down my bed. About 2.5, maybe 3 feet from me, there was this dark shape. It didn't look human, like a shadow person. It looked very inhuman. It was a shadow, but it seemed like it was craggy and very black. I only saw it for about 2 seconds before my bedroom door burst open. I literally yelled, "What the fuck?" Only to see my housemate Kay standing in the door, asking if I was okay. I told her, yeah, I was asleep. I didn't even think to mention what I had just seen. She told me she heard what sounded like somebody retching or throwing up from her room. She didn't just hear it once either. Kay said the first time that she heard it, it woke her up. She wasn't entirely sure she had actually heard Kay. She decided that since she woke up to use the bathroom and apparently she was in there, she heard the noise again, clear as anything. And this is why she came to check on me. She thought maybe I was really sick. Told her I was fine, it wasn't me, and I knew it wasn't my dog because I've heard her get sick in the middle of the night and I always wake up when it happens. At this point, dog is definitely awake, but not acting strange. She never does when stuff like this happens. Kay accepts what I say and goes back to bed. As I'm laying on my bed in the dark, I just have this really unsettling feeling. I manage to get back to sleep and think nothing of it for the rest of the day. About a day or two later, however, I'm in the kitchen getting myself a drink or something, and Kay and I are alone in the house. All of a sudden, Kay calls to me from the other side of the house. I go over to see what she needs. I get to her room and she tells me she feels like she needs me to see this. Otherwise, I wouldn't believe her. I give her a quizzical look and follow her into her room. The porcelain doll I had gifted her about 3 years ago had fallen about 3 feet away from its place on top of a curio Kay has in her room. It's along with these other 4 or so porcelain dolls, all of which haven't moved an inch. She gives me this wide-eyed look and says that she was in the shower, nowhere near the doll. She didn't even hear it fall. But when she came out, her shower's connected to her bedroom, the doll was on the floor. Nothing had bumped it. The doll hadn't been recently moved or anything. Because it sits in a position where its legs are folded under it, the doll itself should be pretty stable. She was pretty spooked, and I took the opportunity to explain what I thought I saw the other night before she came into my room. It felt unsafe to be talking about it in the house, though. Kay insisted we leave for a little while and get out. Once we were in the car and driving away, it felt okay to talk about it. I mentioned to Kay that feeling of hesitance I had at saying anything about it in that house. Kay said that she felt the same, scared to talk about it while we were in there. Got home after about 2 hours of staying out and away. We saved the whole place together, and since then nothing else has happened. I don't know why, but it seems like we just randomly get these paranormal encounters every few months, especially if I haven't saged in a while. The house isn't built on a site where anyone died. The house itself isn't super old, and none of us are actively into the occult, so I'm not entirely sure why this stuff seems to happen. The thing that spooks me is whatever is in the house seemed genuinely frightening, and it definitely spooked my very non-believer housemates into feeling like something unexplained was happening. Most of the time, the shit I experience isn't super scary or disturbing, just mildly weird. At least, on one occasion, an entity that visited was just cute and mischievous. I'm not sure what it was in my house, and I wonder if anybody else has experienced seeing something like what I saw that night. If you guys have any answers, I'd appreciate hearing your theories and experiences. Haunted house I used to live in. My family had just moved out of our very first house in Arizona due to having a small space for us 4 siblings, 2 brothers and 1 sister. We moved to a nice 4-bedroom home with a huge backyard and lots of living space for all the kids to have fun. I was 8 or 9 at the time. The day we moved in, there really wasn't much help for my parents carrying in stuff from the moving truck. All I wanted to do was grab my stuff from my room because that's all I cared about at the time. My brothers, who were older than me, wanted to share a room, and my sister and I got our own rooms, which was so nice at first because I was able to not be annoyed by my brothers while trying to sleep or have friends over. The first item I had brought into the house was a green silk mesh-type lamp. I was in love with this thing for some reason. I wanted that in my room first before anything else to claim which room was mine. Quickly ran inside with my lamp and sprinted to the first room on the left of the hallway. I knew it was the room for me. Perfect sized room for activities with friends or even to go play with Legos and other toys. I quickly found an outlet in the corner of the room to plug in this magnificent, but ugly now that I think about it, lamp into the wall. As I'm plugging in the lamp, I hear someone whispering behind me. Thought it was my brother, so I say back to him, "Hold on, I'm fixing my lamp." As I turn around, I see no one behind me, so I quickly get up and look down the hallway, through the rooms. No one to be found. I walk outside to the moving truck, and my whole family's out there sorting stuff around. I asked my brothers if they had come in and said something to me while I was in the room, and they both laughed and said no. Totally thought that they were joking with me, so I left it alone. A couple of weeks passed by, and we're finally fully settled into our new home. What a relief, doing nothing except make my room look awesome. I feel ya. Hadn't done any exploring of the house really, because I was too busy making my room perfect. It was finally time to see what cool features this house had for 8 or 9-year-old me. First thing I noticed was an extra bedroom with like wallpaper of Mickey Mouse and Disneyland with an old-time feel to it. There was a room attached to the carport that we had on the side of the house. A tool room connected to it also. My parents had put all the extra boxes and cleaning supplies in the old, creepy-looking room. I asked my parents, why did they share a room if there's one right here? They didn't give me an answer. They told me to not talk about the storage room and only go in there to get into the carport. Oh, I agreed, and I moved on. From the laundry room, there was the kitchen, and the previous owners had extended the house out another 800, 900 square feet with a massive game room next to the dining area and kitchen. From the gaming room, that was our outside area, covering over half an acre with a small little shed and shack in the corner and a tree house that seemed very, very old and run down. On the other side of the game room was a little room with a fireplace, great to hang around during the holidays, and next to that was a living room. Overall, it was a huge house for me at the time. I was so happy I had a lot of room to run around and be a stupid little kid. A couple of months passed by and the family was doing well. I'd gone to a new school and met some good friends that actually lived in the same neighborhood as me. So we obviously became best friends, since we could easily have sleepovers and whatnot. One night on the weekend, my best friend had slept over. We started off by playing a video game in my room. He had asked me what's wrong with my closet door, and we had investigated it. Turns out it had been off-center in the side. So I fixed it, but while I was in the closet, I had noticed a tiny little door that went to the bottom of the house. I noticed it was held in with nails, so I barely pulled it and it came right off. My friend had a mini flashlight he liked to carry around, so we used that to look inside. I could see where the bathroom was because I could see the pipes and even the bathtub. It was dark and really, really creepy. Just had a bad feeling about the opening up of that little door. Made me get chills down my neck because it had a different type of atmosphere once I looked inside and used the flashlight to look around. I told my friend to help me put the little door back on so we could get back to having fun playing games. Little did we know we had just let something out. We had moved to the game room since we're being loud and didn't want to wake up my parents or siblings. It was about 11, maybe 12 at night. We had a huge TV in the game room, so we're just having fun, playing Halo and Call of Duty. Our game room had windows all around it, looking into the backyard. My friend and I were playing video games, and all of a sudden we heard tapping on the window. At first, I thought it was maybe my cat messing around with, like, the hanging cord from the blinds, maybe. I ignored it. Happened again, but from a different window. My friend had asked me to go get my cat. When we turned around from the couch, my cat was not in the room with us. So we both get a little weird feeling that something wasn't right. We ignored it once again. Finally, after hearing it for a third time, we would go investigate the noise. My friend and I both got up and went to the back of the room to look outside the window through a small crack in the blinds. We had seen nothing at all except a tree that could maybe barely hit the window with a branch. We debated on whether it was the tree or not for a couple of minutes, but then, all of a sudden, my friend was frozen. I asked him, "What's wrong?" He didn't answer. I kept asking and asking. He finally replied, "Look at your shed." I looked, and there I had seen two faint glowing eyes looking right over at us. We both dashed from the window and into the couch. We were frightened, but didn't want to wake up my parents because, well, would have probably gotten in trouble doing so. I just started coming up with ideas and what it could have possibly been. We had so many, so we eventually just kind of let it go and played more games until we passed out. Another couple of months passed with little to no noise or creepy things happening to me. I felt normal for once. Until one night I'm going to sleep in my room, and I usually kept my door open just so my cat could get in, and he had walked right in and I couldn't really see him. He was a black cat and my room was obviously dark, so all I could do was hear him. I heard him walk in and look around like any other cat would do. Then I heard him do something in my closet door, or to it. At least I think it was him to this day. He had opened my closet door just enough to walk inside, and then silence. I thought to myself, he's just exploring, it's fine. I slept it off. The next morning I'd woken up to my closet door being almost basically halfway open. I went to close it, but I noticed the little door in the corner of the closet had been taken off and put to the side, as if somebody had placed it there. I went to ask my whole family if they had gone into my room last night or this morning. They all said no. I ignored it once again and tried coming up with this dumb idea as to what it could have been. I put the little door back on and went on with my day. Same thing happened the next night. Cats walk in, open closet, silence. The morning, same thing with the little door in the closet set up on the side of the wall with the blackness of the underground of the house completely visible. At this point, I knew it was my brothers messing with me or my parents working on the house or something. Both of them denied it was them. At this point, I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. No one else was having these things happen to them. I felt alone. My best friend had come over again, and this time his mom had dropped him off instead of him walking. They both stepped inside the house, and my mother had said, "This feels very dark. I cannot be in this house." As she says this, her car, obviously in park, starts rolling down the little driveway we have. We all run after it and see that it's still in the park position. How could that even be possible? She instantly left and had never come back. Her son still was my best friend, so it's okay. I might have wore out the parking brake. That was the first time my parents had thought of something that didn't sound right with the house. They obviously shook it off. The rest of the night felt normal and good since I had my friend over. Of course, all of the noises that I had heard up to this point were nonsense. I totally ignored everything, thinking it was all a lie. Well, I thought wrong. A couple of weeks pass, and it feels darker. I no longer feel it's just my family in this home. I get scared all the time and just feel like I had to be next to my parents' side all the time. I thought maybe I should have another friend come over, try to have fun. So I invited a friend over that was on my football team. He had been dropped off, and we watched movies and played games all night. That was in the living room because I knew that he would get scared in the game room, knowing from experience. My brother's on the same team as us, so he was also friends with them, so we all hung out having fun. It was becoming late in the night, and we all decided we would sleep in the living room together. My parents had brought out an air mattress for one of us to sleep on. I slept on the little couch closest to the kitchen and walk-in area. My brother slept in the air mattress, and our friend had slept on the larger couch on the other side of the room. The room itself really wasn't too big, so we basically were sleeping close to each other. My friend's couch could touch mine, so there was a gap in the corner of the room with an empty space, and the air mattress was touching both couches almost. I think you get how big this room is. It was late, around 11 p.m. That's when we decided to go to sleep. We finished up whatever movie we were watching and went to bed. My brother and my friend both fell asleep pretty quick. About 35, maybe 45 minutes after we'd gone to sleep, I called their names and both didn't answer, assuming that they were asleep. I was wide awake. I could not sleep. While laying there, I heard a little girl crying and saying, "Dad, Dad, Dad." I thought it was my sister. She usually cries due to having nightmares or migraines. I ignored it and thought that, well, perhaps it would just be resolved. But again, a couple of minutes later I heard it again, only to realize it was getting closer to the living room. I was scared, so I woke up my brother and told him to listen. Obviously, right when I wake him up, it stops. He got mad at me and went back to sleep. It happened a third time, and it was even closer. Thought I was going crazy, so I ignored it and thought of happy things. Kinda helped and made me fall asleep. Randomly at 3 a.m. I woke up, wide awake. The room should have been dark, but it was somewhat bright. Bright enough to where I could see my brother and my friend clear as day. And the weird part, they both were awake. I could see their eyes open. We had all waken up at 3 a.m. randomly without waking each other up. They both were in front of me, so I could see them before they saw me, and eventually they both realized they were awake and looked at me. They started crying for some reason. I thought, what the hell is going on with them? They were frozen and crying, looking over at me. I asked them, "What are you guys doing?" My brother finally told me, "Don't move, but look in the corner of the couches slowly." I was already panicking and still get chills writing this today. I look in between the couches and there was a girl, probably around 5'1" in a white old dress with brown hair and green eyes and a cut-up face, bruised neck and body, glowing and looking right at me. Eyes wide open and her nasty teeth were showing also, just gazing at me with a grin on her face. I was frozen. I couldn't tell or scream or anything. I was in paralysis. It was the longest 2 minutes of my life. I would blink and she was still on the inside of my eyelids. I was so afraid. Eventually, she had disappeared and we all got up and woke my parents up. We'd explained what had happened, and the next morning we had a priest come and bless the house. After we had the priest bless our house, it felt lighter and just in a better mood. I had stopped hearing noises and feeling anxiety and nervousness all the time. I don't know exactly what I saw, but it still is the scariest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Still cannot explain some of the things I've seen. Can't puzzle them together either. The one room the priest didn't go into was the extra bedroom with the Mickey Mouse wallpaper. Was it on purpose? Could he feel he couldn't bless that room due to the demonic presence that he couldn't handle? Was it in the little girl's room? Never went through that room again. A couple years later, we still moved out of that house. Spirit didn't let us out of my room. So I was about 16 years old, and to that time very interested in ghosts, paranormal things, all of that. My mom is, I wouldn't really say a medium, but highly esoteric and can see things in or around other humans. For example, she can feel bad energies and also describe dead loved ones of her customers standing beside perfectly. If you want to hear more stories of my mom, just let me know. So her being so sensitive to those things did wake my interest even more. So I went online and researched on ways to communicate with energies or spirits and found out a way to do so. I invited my sister and 2 of our neighbors' kids to help and watch. I didn't wanted to do that alone, because of obvious reasons. We waited for my mother to leave because she prohibited specifically to ever communicate with the other world. We wrote letters and numbers and also yes, no on a paper, cropped them, and then arranged them in a circle. Basically made a Ouija board. We lowered the shutters in my room, and yeah, we did that in my room, stupid I know. We lit candles, placed them in different places in my room. Me and my sister placed our hands on an upside-down drinking glass, and the neighbor kids watched from the bed. The first few times, they laughed and chuckled when they said phrases like, "Is someone here who wants to talk with us?" Or, if you want to communicate, please do that. After a few minutes, a few candles started to flicker. Didn't think much about it because candles flicker usually. But after some more time, some of them really started to freak me out. They started to look like somebody tried to blow them out. You know, like when you want to blow out candles but don't use enough air, so you just blow the flame in one direction. The glass started moving. I looked at my sister and she looked at me, simultaneously asking if one of us was perhaps pushing it. We both got really freaked out, so we took our hands off the glass and that frickin' thing moved on its own. I got a panic attack and we all screamed and ran to my door to get out. We closed it before, and in hindsight, it was a very stupid idea. I pressed the handle of my door down, but that thing didn't move a bit. My sister and the neighbor kids started to help pressing it down. We leaned on it with all of our body weight combined, and it didn't move an inch. The candles started to go out, and we just screamed and screamed. Eventually, it opened. We ran into the kitchen into a corner and just cried. From this day on, I didn't sleep well in my room because I felt watched all the time and my writing desk chair started moving on its own. I placed it under the desk and the next morning it stood a good meter away from it. My mom also noticed that my room didn't feel right, like something lurks inside of it, and asked me if I did something stupid. Eventually, I told her and she was furious, saying that I could have brought much more evil into her apartment than a spirit that amuses itself by disturbing us. She did a ritual in my room, saying a few phrases, putting a protective circuit it, and smoking it out with sage. I was never disturbed by it again. Just one hit this time. Nonetheless, to say I'll never do that again. Weird happenings. This is not my first time having something like this happen to me, but it's the first time it's happened to my girlfriend. It's 2:37 a.m. and I just got home from dropping my girlfriend off at her house. I've had the feeling of someone watching me since around noon yesterday. Then, when I went to pick her up to go to the Walmart around 9:45, when I got to her house, she, by the way, lives in a really nice mobile home park, I was waiting for her in my car with the windows down for a few minutes. I was reading on my phone when I kinda saw someone walk by my car wearing dark clothing out of the corner of my eye. I didn't look up from reading until a few seconds later. I didn't see anyone in my rearview mirrors, but I could still hear footsteps on the pavement. I even turned around and saw no one there. They didn't go into another house because the 2 lots across the street are empty. Kinda got creeped out. Finally, a few minutes later, Emily came outside to let the dogs into the backyard before we left. So I got out of the car and had a cigarette with her. That was while we were talking and waiting for the dog to do their business. Then we heard this noise next door, like bricks falling. I may have screamed a little. The bricks that her neighbor had stacked up next to this flower bed had all fallen down. This Virgin Mary statue had fallen and her head was broken off. We both walked over to look because it startled both of us. We were worried her neighbor may have fallen inside the mobile home and caused the bricks to shift. She went closer. I stayed on her driveway. She got in front of his house and she looked up from where the bricks had fallen and her neighbor was peeking out the window right at her. We didn't know what the noise was and was looking out the window and then saw her. He thought that she made the noise. He came out and was like, "What's going on?" We told him his bricks had fallen and his Mary statue had broken. He said he'd look into it in the morning. That's when I told her about the quote-unquote person walking by my car right before she came out of the house. That freaked her out a bit. So we went to take the dogs inside. Her Chihuahua, Squirt, basically jumped into my arms when I went to pet him and he was shaking. And her Catahoula. Her Catahoula Blow or BLEUX, blow, wanted to get back into the house. Didn't even come to see me like he usually does. They were scared to death. I don't have any idea what happened, and all I know is we got the dogs settled in the house and we went to Walmart. On the way, she kept looking in my back seat and touching her neck and never let go of my hand. I asked her what was up, and she said something touched her neck several times. Then she told me that she had a feeling like someone was watching her since she got home from work at 8:30 p.m. All I can think of is in the back seat of my tarot cards. I literally just cleansed them last week and haven't touched them since. Tonight we're going to burn sage in our house when she gets home from work. I'm seeing people who aren't there. My girlfriend lives in a nice trailer park about 5 minutes away from where I live. We're in the suburb of St. Petersburg, Florida. Where she lives, there's a lot of old and elderly people and not a lot of people our age, mid-30s. A few of the trailers in the park are not occupied because it's mainly snowbirds. People who come for the summer, right? Perhaps? What's a snowbird? I've been with my girlfriend Emily for just about 6 months. We just found out her mom, who lives in another state, was given 6 months to live, and of course Emily was upset. So she asked me to come over, and we ate a late dinner with her. Got there around 1:30 a.m. Friday morning. We have dinner, hang out, and talk, and I rub her back. When she's ready to go to bed, I'm leaving, and we're hugging, and she gives me a really sweet kiss and thanks me for coming over to be with her. When she backs up, I see this old man. He's standing in the yard 2 doors down where no one lives. Gives us a look like he's disgusted with seeing gay PDA at 4:30 in the morning, so I say something along the lines of, "We're being watched, babe." She turns around, and I'm still looking at the old man. When she turned to look, he basically turned around and walked around the side of the house, but she should have seen him walking. But she just said, "Are you sure?" The guy that lived there died, and his wife moved back to Maine a few months ago. See, she put it up for sale. She pointed to the for sale sign in front of it, and I swore up and down I saw the guy, and she said she believes me. I described the man I saw, and she confirmed that that's what the man who passed away looked like, down to his khaki overalls and light blue plaid short-sleeve button-up shirt and brown ball cap. It's not the first time I've seen people that she couldn't see. She doesn't make fun of me, and I've had 2 dreams since that night, and he's been in them in the background, staring like I saw him the other morning. Snowbird, new word. Snowbird's the word. I have been dreaming about the same person who I've never met or seen for years. Could they be a ghost? For about 4 years now, I've been having repeated dreams about a mystery man who always looks the same and feels the same every time I dream about him. The thing is, I've never met or seen this person in real life. These dreams feel deeper than others I've had in the past. I usually have new dreams involving him every 2 weeks or so. They're not usually back to back. I'm a young adult and very introverted, so I've never had any romantic relationships before, and I've never been romantic towards someone in my life. I'm not really into that stuff, to be honest, and yet I can feel that this man in my dreams has such strong romantic feelings towards me. I reciprocate these feelings toward him. It feels like a very deep connection where we don't even need to speak to know the depth of our love we're having for each other. Never felt anything like that in real life. He's very distinct looking, and his features are as such. Very big, bright green eyes. Once in a while, he wears black glasses. Jet black hair, very tall, often wears a big green comfy sweater. He looks and feels like a giant teddy bear. Someone very warm, soft, kind, sweet, that type of thing. Every time I look at him in the dream, he's always looking directly at me, he also never turned his back on me and never looks away from me. He's always facing towards me and looking at me first before I look at him in any dream. The way he looks at me is what I can only imagine how somebody in love would look at the person they love. He'll often just be around me and be nearby. He usually doesn't speak, just smiles, sits, or stands close to me. He almost radiates this energy of love and content. Very peaceful feeling whenever he's around. The dreams are very symbolic too. I once had a dream where him and I were in a garden. Saw the exact same two blue monarch butterflies flying around each other like a pair. Monarch butterflies that are blue apparently don't exist in the real world. Upon doing some research, I put my hand out and one of them flew over to me and landed on my finger. I then showed the mysterious man and exclaimed, "Look, there's two of them." He then looked at me and smiled at me and then gestured toward an open door just behind me, or behind him. I let the butterfly in my finger fly back to the other butterfly and took the man's hand and walked with him through the door. Then the dream ended. That dream is a couple of months old, but still sticks with me to this day. All of this makes me wonder if this mysterious dream person exists out there somewhere, or if they actually are a ghost or spirit who visits me in my dreams. Nothing wrong with having that be the place to set your bar. Dream about a vampire. For about 4 years now, I've been having repeated dreams about a mysterious man who always looks the same and feels the same every time I dream about him. The thing is, I've never met or seen this person in real life, and these dreams feel deeper than others I've had in the past. I'm a young adult, very introverted, so am I repeating myself? Let me check. Same person, different story, I believe. I had this dream with this man in it again. It was set in an enchanted forest surrounded by tall trees. We were also away from regular society where no one could find us. The colors in this dream were so crisp, clear, and vivid. I was inside of a medieval modest cottage that was cozy with warm colors around. A warm, bright fireplace and hearth, a comfy couch, and a table with lots of books on top. There was wood, stone walls, and torches on those walls. It had a beautiful interior that felt safe and comfortable. Homey. I'm standing in the middle of the room in this medieval dress, just taking in my surroundings. Then in enters this mysterious man again. He entered from a white-painted cottage door, then closed it. Upon seeing him, I somehow already knew that we were in a relationship and were living together. He had just walked in from tending the garden outside and doing yard work in the summer sun, almost as if this was a routine for him. He saw me looking at him and then looked right back at me. Every time I look at him in a dream, he always is looking directly at me. But the way he looked at me, including in this dream, is what I can only imagine how someone in love would look at the person they love. He had a lovely smile, the one where you can see the person's eyes squint because they're just so genuinely happy. I observed him, and he was tall and stood firm, relaxed, gentle, comfortable. He had long jet black hair that went slightly past his shoulders, wearing black gardening gloves in his hands, and he also wore Victorian black Wellington boots to avoid getting mud in his shoes. He approached me, and I saw him up close. He had beautiful green eyes like he always does in every dream. He also always has black hair, but it's usually shorter. Generally in dreams before and after this point, he'll often just be around me and maybe be nearby. He usually doesn't speak, just smiles or sits and stands close to me. He almost radiates this energy of love and contentment. It's a very peaceful feeling whenever he's around. Anyways, he did end up speaking to me. He didn't say a word, but he spoke to me through my mind. The term being telepathy, I believe. Indeed. He repeatedly said in my head, "I'm a vampire. for about a minute straight. However, I wasn't afraid of him because he wasn't a monster to me. I felt and always feel such strong romantic feelings towards him, and I basically reciprocate these feelings towards myself. It feels like a very deep connection where we don't even need to speak to know the depth of love we have for each other. Never felt anything like that in real life. Then suddenly his eyes turned a different color, or a mix of colors, I should say. His eyes changed from green to bright orange. That orange color was in the center of his eye. Then he had a yellow color that outlined the outer rim of his eye, and a red color that outlined the inner rim of his eye. It was very strange, but I remember saying to him, "I've never seen eyes like yours before." I just stared at him for a long time. Then he proceeded to smile, and I gave him a big hug and a quick kiss. Then that's when I woke up, so basically I was in a happy, committed relationship with the vampire. Not sure what it all means, but I thought it was pretty cool to share. That thing I said before about setting the bar. Keep that part, but not the vampire part. That's just my 2 cents. Help me figure out what's going on at my house. I've recently moved back to my childhood home with my partner. That's because my parents are now living in long-term care. I didn't have any strange experiences growing up there, but for many years, Mom has seen a dark shadow figure hovering above her in bed. For this reason, she started drinking alcohol every night to fall asleep. That was in her late 60s. Continued for nearly a decade up until going to long-term care this year. I never believed these stories as Mom was diagnosed with dementia around that time, but my partner and I had moved in the house that maybe 8 years while my parents had separated. Each of us had one weird experience at that time. Mom was visiting family, and he and I were alone in the house for a few weeks. I'd been briefly, quote-unquote, locked in the basement by something holding the doorknob. It doesn't lock, and I felt resistance on the knob. My partner had the garden hose water tap turned off on him while holding the water in the garden. He was in sight of the tap in a fenced-in yard with no one else home. Fast forward 8 years, and he and I have moved into the house in July 2022. Strange things happened almost immediately. The house needs a complete renovation, and we've been spending our leisure time in the backyard with one big inconvenience. There's no electrical plugs outside, so we ran extension cords and used flashlights. Since moving in, our flashlights are turning on by themselves almost daily, and we're using a ton of batteries. This was causing many arguments in the beginning, with both of us adamant that we weren't leaving them on. My parents were basically leaving them on. Oops, reread that line. My parents were basically hoarding flashlights, and I don't even know how many we have, but they're basically every size and style, so it's definitely not a defect or manufacturing problem. I figured out what was happening in mid-August when different types of flashlights were turning on near me while my partner wasn't home. Started leaving different types of... I left all these flashlights in my line of sight, and I was checking them periodically. Sometimes they'd turn on 4 or 5 times during the span of an afternoon. Sometimes it's the same one over and over, and other times it's different ones turning on once. This even happened with our safety flashlight in the car while parked in the driveway. Up until this point, the flashlights were only doing the daytime thing with me. When I was on holidays, and now that I'm back at work, it started happening to my partner. He's noticed multiple types of flashlight turning on while left untouched on shelves in the garage. Other strange happenings include water taps inside the house just being on when we walk in. Sometimes it's only cold or hot water, and sometimes it's both. But it's always on full blast and loud enough that you can't miss it or not notice leaving the water on because it's that loud. When I'm alone, I keep seeing a shadow person in the corner of my eye, but no one's there when I look. Interestingly, this doesn't happen if my cat or dog are near me. dream state I've never felt before that let me communicate with my recently deceased mother. This happened 3 days after my mom passed away from sepsis, pneumonia, and brain cancer. It's January 3rd, 2021. Sleep wasn't an easy thing to come by right after losing your mother. I finally must have started to fall asleep from exhaustion. You know that state between awake and asleep? I remembered feeling very similar to that. The difference was I felt fully plugged into that state of being. Like all time had stopped and someone had paused the moment between being awake and sleep to visit me. I felt a familiar presence. I immediately recognized as my mom's, and some of the more pressing feelings I remember from my mom's side was she didn't have a lot of time to talk. She knew I needed her. I could only ask yes or no questions. The conversation went something like this. Are you mad at me for how things turned out? No. Could I have done anything different to help save you? No, everything's going to be okay. Yes. Then I felt I couldn't waste this opportunity to just talk with her and began asking what I should do about my older sister. I remember feeling rushed like I had to say goodbye in 3 seconds. I felt like I broke the one rule in that state of being. The one thing that if you did do, you'd be sent back to your reality. Woke up and was more at peace with it. I ate for the first time, and that night I slept a lot better. I still always try to make that connection, but it's been almost 2 years I haven't had any luck. Furniture moved and doors disappeared. When I was around 7, we had guests visiting, so my 2 brothers and I shared a big bedroom. There were 2 beds and 1 fold-out cot. Everyone went to bed and all was normal. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, my brother woke me up, freaking out a little. He said, "Something's not right," told me to look around. When I looked around the moonlit room, all the furniture was moved all over the place, including the bed I was sleeping in. And a note, I'm a super light sleeper, and this was a heavy-ass bed. I then got up, wandered around the room in awe, trying to figure out how my brother could have moved all this heavy shit. We were only 8 and 10. And with me out, just waking up, or rather without me waking up, I'm sure, assuming this was an elaborate prank at first. I looked over and saw my other brother sleep on his bed, which was now on the other side of the room as well. Dressers were all off the wall and in the middle of the room. Basically, everything was in a new place that made no sense. I told my brother we needed to wake up our other one. He didn't think that would go over well because we'd freak them out if we decided not to. Now, I know what you're thinking at this point. Not rocket science, you got pranked, but this is where things get way weirder. My first thought after seeing the room was like, we need to turn the lights on. One problem with that. The switches were completely gone. Yep, as in they disappeared. So now both of us are starting to freak out, and the only light we had on was actually pretty good, was moonlight coming in through the windows. The street light kind of gave us decent visibility as well. Either way, this was the point I knew it wasn't a joke. But wait, it gets weirder. At this point, we just needed to get out of that room. Something was definitely wrong. We both looked for the door, searched all the walls, and that was gone as well. We were now trapped and losing it at this point. Not only was the bedroom door gone, but the closet as well. This went on for about 5 minutes. We tried everything. Pushed on walls, ran around in circles yelling. There was nothing we could do. At the point of almost giving up, totally perplexed and confused, turned around, the actual door suddenly reappeared on the wall and just searched and ran my hands across. My brother took advantage of the opportunity and rushed into the hallway to the top of the stairs, screaming for her parents, whose bedroom was downstairs. My mother rushed to the bottom, asking why we're going crazy with guests in the house in the middle of the night. When we told her what was happening, she didn't believe us. We told her to come look. Note, this all happened in about 10 seconds. But But we both turned around and looked back in the room, and everything was back in its original location, including my other brother still sleeping like a log on the cot. Anyways, today me and my brother are professionals, and he chooses not to talk about it with anyone but me. When I bring it up, he gets uncomfortable, sighs, and shakes his head and doesn't really know what to do, and I guess doesn't really want to revisit it. I know a lot of people have had stuff move around, but to have doors and light switches completely disappear and reappear to multiple people, that was some crazy shit. Hope I never run into something like that again. It's only left me with lots of questions, of which I'm fairly sure I'll never get an answer to.